folks you haven't heard from on the call today. Rick's going to give us a quick debrief. It's been a couple months since we talked. Rick's going to go over what the steering committee provided for direction and feedback relative to some of the things we talked about when we were in Peer a few months back. We're going to talk about the couple of the focal areas we discussed in Peer, being human dimensions, land use change, and then this new topic that relates to the Bakken and development of some information relative to the Bakken. Ashley's going to give us an update on our communications efforts over the last few months, and in particular where we're headed with our annual report. And then I want to briefly talk about where we're going to move in December, January, and February with some of our upcoming science-related webinars. So with that, I know one new person on the call, and do a quick introduction for her, and that's Megan Cross. Megan, would you mind introducing yourself and what you're working on to the group?
No problem. I just started working for the Eastern Tallgrass and Big River LCC as a SCEP. So I'm working at the University of Minnesota on my master's, and I'm doing a couple of things for the LCC, one of which is a Gulf hypoxia synthesis of the literature, and then the other is a research project with David Fulton at the University of Minnesota that you'll be hearing a little more about later. So is that good?
That's great, Megan. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Rick real quick here, and Rick and Jeff had a great distinct pleasure yesterday to meet with the Secretary of Interior. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that, Rick, as well as where we left off the discussion with the steering committee. I'll let you and Jeff decide who wants to talk about the secretarial visit.
All right, I'll start, and then Jeff can fill in as well. So I had the opportunity of being in Minneapolis yesterday to give a presentation to the Secretary on the Plains and Prairie Potholes LCC. She was in Minneapolis for a number of reasons, but I'll just mention a couple of them. They were going to actually fly her around the prairies and show her wetland drainage and prairie conversion, but the weather wasn't cooperative, so we all stayed in Minneapolis and met at the Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge. So in the morning, we had about an hour and a half with her and several folks from the refuge system and the Partners for Wildlife program, and I presented her with information on what we all call the crisis on the prairies. You know, the movement of corn and beans into the area, the tile drainage, the conversion of prairies, the loss of CRP. The refuge folks talked specifically from their Partners program aspect about working with landowners, but again, the loss of wetlands, prairie. I was able to give a presentation to her on kind of where we ended up with the steering committee and our two focal areas that are coming up on land use change and human dimensions work. We had 10 minutes max with her for our little piece and used very few slides. But the bottom line was that the presentations that everybody gave made a great impression on her. I know she is fully steeped in what's going on in the western part of our area with oil and gas. She wasn't as well versed in what's going on with tile drainage and land conversion activities for agriculture. So I talked in my part about our two focal areas, land use change and human dimensions, and the tie those two have to one another. She was very, very interested in the human dimensions things that we're going to be working on and thinking about. She's a business person. Her educational background and early work experience is in mechanical engineering. She was the CEO of REI, so she's strongly steeped in business, and she's strongly steeped in human dimensions aspects of business. And so she was very interested, asked a lot of questions about what we're doing and the direction we're going, and was very focused on that. She brought up landscape scale conservation many times over the course of the day. She held a press conference in the morning and talked extensively about landscape conservation, landscape scale, the need to go bigger. She mentioned the types of things we're talking about in terms of human dimensions and land use change a number of times. The other reason she was there is one of her other initiatives is to get young people, kids, the millennials, more involved in conservation. And so they were going to take her to the Prairie Wetlands Learning Center in Fergus Falls, but it just didn't work because of the weather. They did hook her up by video, and she did get a chance to talk to a number of the kids up there that were there. So that was pretty neat too.
Jeff, any perspective from your relationship with her and your discussion?
So my part was to give her some of the technical information from the LCC world that we're working on. Jeff was able to participate in a session she had at the end of the day with Department of the Interior executives. And Jeff, I'll let you talk about that part.
Yeah, you covered it really well. One thing some of the audience might not know, the other part of her training, she started out as a mechanical engineer in the oil industry. And I heard her at the National Press Conference, the question came up about oil fracking technologies and how that affects the environment. First thing she said, by the way, you got to know, is there anybody in the room that's ever fracked a well? And she was the only one that raised her hand. So she does know that side of the thing, but yeah, I want to emphasize that she knows the business side of the world as well as the environmental, and the balance is what she kind of reiterated during the DOI session. And she has an order out there. I didn't even know these things existed, but the Department of Interior has orders in it. The subject is improving mitigation policies and practices in the Department of the Interior, and it kind of goes with this balancing act of protecting and conserving the environment as well as keeping the economy going. The only other thing I could probably add is I did punch in another one in terms of partnerships and the value of those things, and she really liked hearing that concept of agencies working together to set their priorities. She was really asking, what do we stop doing? And I turned and said, well, what we ought to emphasize is what we can get done as a partnership. So I won't add any more to that. I think Rick handled it pretty well there.
Thanks, Jeff and Rick. So speaking of what we're working on, tell us what we covered in Portland with the steering committee here about 2 months ago.
So we had what I will tell you from my perspective was the best steering committee meeting we've had, and I'll cut to the chase right away. This is the best example of engagement by our steering committee members that I've seen in the 3.5 years we've been together, and it was, I'll just say it was awesome. They really got engaged. So I'm going to hit a couple of high points. We had a 4-hour meeting. We covered a number of things that I still haven't gotten the notes out yet. I'm still working on those. They'll come out probably early next week. But the two big things for our meeting today were we spent quite a bit of time at that meeting briefing them on the two focal areas that the tech committee spent a lot of time on in Peer, that is focusing on land use change and focusing on human dimensions and the interactions between those two. There was a lot of discussion about that, and I want to share one comment specifically that came from Matt Hogan, who is the Deputy Regional Director for the service out of Region 6 in Denver, and he's actually the Services Steering Committee rep. Tom Melius is the chair, but Tom does not participate representing the service. But we talked first about the human dimensions aspect, and Matt made a comment that I thought was pretty interesting, and others echoed his comment, by the way, which I also thought was pretty neat. Matt said, the focus here seems to be moving towards social science, and that's really an innovative approach, and it's pretty neat that the technical team is pushing the social science human dimensions needs. And then the discussion emanated from there, and at the end of that discussion, the steering committee heartily endorsed that focal area, that the need for human dimensions is something that this LCC can really provide some added value to other science activities that are going on. So I won't go into all of the discussion about that, but they were very, very pleased with that particular focal aspect. We then went to the discussion about land use change, and those discussions went much the same way. There was a lot of feedback from steering committee members about how important it is to be able to not only detect land use change and at finer scales perhaps than we've done before, but the importance of understanding how we might get ahead of some of that stuff using the tools that we're going to develop for our next RFP. So they also strongly supported our focus on that aspect as well. And the other part of that discussion that came out was they also think that this is something we should consider top priority over the next couple of years, 2 to 3 years, not just a one-year RFP thing, but a longer view of the world there. Those discussions then led into a specific proposal from Kate Kitchell, who's the steering committee member from BLM, and I'll ask Jeff Stoner here to talk a little bit about the USGS's role here perhaps as well. But Kate is part of a group called the Bakken Federal Executive Group, and it's federal agencies dealing with issues in the Bakken, BLM, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau Reclamation, set up by executive order. And they've met, and actually Secretary Jewell, as you may recall, was in Dickinson, North Dakota last August, which is why I left the tech team meeting a day early, because I had to go out and participate in that meeting as well. But Kate has put together a draft proposal that I think you all gotten.
Yeah, and I've got a screenshot of that later.
And Mike will put up a screenshot. But the steering committee, under the auspices of this is fits with this land use change and land use change detection thing we want to work on. They were pretty supportive of the draft proposal, but they asked that the technical team and the steering committee members weigh in and provide feedback. So what Kate's proposing is, I won't go into the details here, but to save a little time, it's what I'll call a status and trends report. Trying to get a handle in one place on what's going on out there in terms of impacts or potential impacts from oil development in the entire Bakken region. And we've funded a number of things, as you all know, that deal with oil development activities, some stuff Doug Johnson's doing, some stuff Todd Preston's doing, and what they're interested in is trying to bring all of this together in one place. And here's kind of the neat thing about this one, and this was another kind of a turning point, I think, for our steering committee meeting. Kate actually came to the table and said the BLM has money to put to this trends and status reports effort if other partners are willing to put money to it as well. And so it's not something we're going to look at under an RFP. This is something that the steering committee is asking you all for technical review of, with the idea that we've gotten to that point where the steering committee members are now buying into this. This is something so important to the steering committee membership that they're willing to take it on without having to do an RFP, and members are talking about providing some funding. So Jeff, why don't you talk a little bit about the potential USGS involvement in this project as well.
But before you do that, Jeff, let me just jump ahead to your slide here. Just to remind people what was sent out prior to this call, as Rita had. On the left side of this screen, you'll see the document that was sent out by Jeff and Max, and on the right side, just to remind you, was the document sent out by Kate Kitchell. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, thanks. I'd forgotten about the Kate Kitchell one, and that we've been asked to redo that, so thanks for that reminder. Before the shutdown in early September, we had Max and I put together this document. It was kind of motivated by the peer technical meeting activities, and where we kind of looked at each other and says, we ought to put down in one place some of the things we're doing and some of the skin in the game stuff, as Rick called it, in peer. And lo and behold, too, at the end of the fiscal year, our DOI and the Landscapes program, which is run out of headquarters, said, hey, we've got a little competition here. We want to know if anybody wants to put in plans for studies that are landscape in nature and conservation in nature. And we thought right away, well, we've already got a good start, and then with this Kate Kitchell idea, we've had some activities already in the Williston Basin. And so actually, Max and company helped put this together. And so we had part of the issue here in putting together this plan is really to try to capture more appropriated dollars from USGS in the future. And so this first part under planning, there's several documents in here of activities that are already being conducted by USGS, and you can read through it in the following pages. But we're most interested, Max and I and others, in stakeholder input, partnership, especially from this partnership, of are we on the right track of setting priorities of some of the things that other people aren't doing in terms of understanding and conserving and getting, as Rick aptly said, getting out ahead of all this development, and that's going to be a challenge, in my opinion. Anyway, we put this out in September before the shutdown, and we were going to ask for comments. There's a typo in here. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter. We were hoping for comments by the end of October. I'd like to, I don't know if we got the newest version in here. I don't think we do. We'd really like to get comments by November 27th because it'll help us guide this planning effort, and hopefully we send this into our headquarters and capture more resources to continue this kind of work.
Jeff, do we have the newest version out to the committee here?
The only difference I would say is the deadline for comments would be November 27th.
So, as an action item for today, why don't we add to that not only comments on the USGS proposal on the left side of the screen, but also the BLM proposal on the right side. So if folks have comments on either one of those, send them in by the 27th of November.
Yeah, and I tried to post this on our SharePoint area with your new website. It's Ashley's been trying to help me, but frankly, if you didn't get this, Mike sent these out, I think, to everybody back in September. But if you need it again, let me know.
Are there any questions for Rick or Jeff on that topic before we move on?
The one last thing I'll mention again is that this was a pretty exciting meeting because the steering committee members really had a good dialogue. They really went back and forth and asked each other questions about these things, and this proposal that BLM has put in that we're asking you all to take a look at really is unique because they came to the table saying, we have resources, we have money to put to this. We're not coming to the LCC table as part of the partnership and saying we're going to wait for the services pot of dollars. We're coming to the table with some money. Others also spoke up and said that they may have resources, either money or expertise to lend to it. So that's a pretty exciting change for us. One other thing that Mike will pitch here a little bit in a minute, we'll talk more about it, but Tom Melius also discussed, as did others, the continuing resolution that was coming at the time, we hoped, but then some potential impacts to reduction in funding for LCCs nationally. And I won't go into those details at this point. We can talk a little bit more about that when Mike talks about the next slide.
Yeah, this is just a follow-up to one of the action items that we had coming out of the peer meeting, which was there was a lot of uncertainty surrounding the potential resources available this year for new starts of research. And we've gotten a little more clarification of what the potential budget looks like. And we had these 5 projects at the top of this slide still in the queue, and we got back with the PIs and adjusted some budgets somewhat. But as folks may remember, this is the 3rd year of the sagebrush rotational grazing study with Vicki Dreitz out in Montana looking at songbird impacts. This is the, I believe, 2nd year of the Sarah Thompson project in the oil patch looking at fragmentation and grassland bird impacts. This is the last year of the Robert Gleason work looking at pattern tile drainage. That one's been delayed a little bit because it took us a long time to get those drains installed. It's the last year, actually, this was extended half a year of the Bob Gresswell work on climate change and fish impacts out in Montana. And I believe this is the 2nd year of 4 for the Pascal Badu project in the Souris River Loop looking at restored wetlands. So that those 5 projects provide us a new funding tail for this year of about $430,000. It looks like the service is going to be having about $800,000 available for the LCC for research this year. That's going to leave us about $370,000 this year for new starts relative to these topic areas we're going to discuss here in a minute. So just so everybody's on the same page, it looks like we've got about $370,000 available this year for new research starts. Is there any questions about that? I know we kind of left this in Pierre with a lot of uncertainty, but it looks like this is as close as we're going to get for now. Okay, with that, why don't we roll right into, I know Larry Gigliotti, I saw that you had joined us online, and we've got Megan Cross on here. I want to talk a little bit about progress we've made in the last couple of months, continuing our development of the human dimensions focal area. And Megan, I might ask you again to talk a little bit more about the project you're doing with Dave Fulton and how that may help us with some of the work we propose out in our geography, looking at some of the landowner human dimension questions. So, Larry, why don't I start with you, and Megan, just chime in whenever you can.
Okay. I haven't gotten very far. I do have an updated map on that little description there that I sent out, that it's going to be wider than just the potholes.
And that includes, so we talked about in Pierre, expanding that into Montana and potentially Wyoming, correct?
Oh, yes. And
okay.
Even, the whole LCC, rather, and I added a different map to that little description there. I was going to do a little bit of traveling and talk to folks, but I haven't set anything up yet. I've talked to David Fulton a little bit and to talk about the stuff that they're going to gather is going to be useful as background information and useful information for what we're going to do. The few states I talked to, they're very excited about the project. My plans are the initial thinking is to get a couple of people from each state that's going to be involved as a team for developing a survey. And hopefully have the initial mailing of the survey conducted by each of the participating states with a mailback survey coming back to South Dakota State University, and a grad student here would be responsible for analyzing that data.
And I think when we had this discussion, Larry and Pierre, Justin and maybe Tom talked about some internal capacity that South Dakota and Montana had on their staff to assist in this. And have you followed up with those folks, and that looks like it's going to happen?
Everyone I've talked to, that seems like a very doable process. I haven't been able to identify people in North Dakota yet, and I haven't gotten a lot of people put together. I've just started doing that. I talked to some folks in Iowa, and they're very interested. The agency folks and the university folks.
Well, it sounds like progress is being made, and anytime that we can maybe work closely with the states on this project, it might expedite some of the process hurdles that the federal government has to go through relative to surveys. So I think that's going to be very helpful.
What I'm hoping is that this process will allow us to, working in a gray area, not have to go through all the OMB checks and balances that they have on doing a survey. That adds a lot of expense and particularly a lot of time of having outside reviewers go over each and every item and the whole process and stuff like that. The people that are going to be involved in this have all have extensive knowledge in conducting surveys the proper way and developing survey instruments. So it's something, I just see that as oversight that isn't necessary.
It's good progress, and I think we're on track for perfecting the question or the specific piece of the RFP here within the next month. Megan, could you provide a little more detail about the project you're doing at the University of Minnesota and how it relates to the geography here in the Dakotas?
Yeah, no problem. So like Larry mentioned, and you've been mentioning, David Fulton and I are working on a study to assess landowners and producers' attitudes and motivations for participating in conservation programs that are beneficial to wildlife. And so what we'll be looking at is trying to evaluate if wildlife benefits are a driving factor for producer enrollment in different U.S. Department of Agriculture programs, and then are hoping to identify and evaluate the reasons that that producers might enter into sustainable agriculture systems. And this is we're doing a closed-ended survey, and the way this is relevant to the Plains and Prairie Potholes LCC is we actually picked one study area that is located in Richland County, North Dakota. So we'll have social surveys in 3 geographic locations, one in Indiana, one in Iowa, and then one in North Dakota. And I guess I don't know how much detail you want, but we're going to try to target 500 people in each area and then stratify them by their participation in CRP programs. So then we'll be looking at the non-participants in conservation programs and participants in conservation programs.
I think that's plenty of detail, Megan. Thank you so much for providing that kind of perspective. And I think these two projects are going to dovetail together very nicely. I'll open it up again to folks on the technical committee if you have any questions or suggested contacts for Megan now that she's just beginning this effort. In particular, Megan, you're looking for folks who might have been involved in some of the great literature studies out there with landowners and behaviors and some of those tipping points for enrollment in conservation programs. I know Marissa Hellering, you're on the phone, and we mentioned to Megan, the Ryan Atwell study here from a year or two ago is one place that she should go and talk to Ryan if possible. But any other suggestions for Megan in her work?
Yeah, this is Jeff Stoner. I will contact you and Dave later, Megan. We're wrapping up a study in Minnesota where we're actually trying to look at the benefits of set-aside lands in watersheds to the Minnesota River that you might not be aware of, and it'd be interesting to see if there's a human dimension to that aspect of the science.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else?
Yeah, one of the things I'm doing is just gathering any type of literature, particularly gray literature. If any states conducted some surveys of our landowners for things like land management and stuff like that, I'd be interested in getting a copy of it. I have just a small amount of literature of things so far.
Perfect. That's right. That's exactly what we're looking for too, Larry. Thank you. Okay. Why don't we move on? And I'm going to turn this over to Johann here in a second. One of the other things that we certainly talked about in detail in Peer is a topic that's near and dear not only to the LCC but certainly the JVs as well, and that's understanding and narrowing down the uncertainties surrounding the land use change that's happening across the upper Midwest. Johann and Kevin and Neil, you guys spend a lot of time thinking about these things. Johann, why don't you tee this one up for us on where we're at?
Sure, I'll just offer a couple quick comments and let those other guys jump in. We haven't probably formalized a document or anything like that at this point about where to take land use change research next. I've been reviewing literature and meeting with different folks. Some interesting meetings I've had have actually been with folks from the crop reinsurance industry who are also interested in land use change. So it might also be near and dear to the hearts of some business folks, Mike. But next steps in kind of development, I have Ben Rashford, which most of you will recognize because he's been a PI on several LCC projects, coming up to visit next week. Also at the same time, Chris Wright from SDSU will be up here, and those guys and Kevin and I will probably spend some time talking, and I'll probably spend a little bit of time with them talking about some other stuff we're working on. But part of what we hope to get around to in that little group is kicking this idea around a little bit more and maybe starting a document. And when we get some kind of document together about kind of our smaller group perspective on land use change and habitat loss in the region, then we will submit that back to this group, and maybe this group can then contribute their thoughts, and we can sort of make a few steps down the road to having a cohesive vision of what we're looking for in land use change projects going forward. That's about where we're at, Mike, at this point. So I'm thinking we'll have more news sort of in a couple of weeks.
But the process step here, Johann, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is that as you continue to refine the question that we might investigate or the hypothesis that's worth pursuing, there's going to be at least one more step here where we send it out to the tech team. Folks have their chance to take a swing at what we're proposing and modify and adjust accordingly, correct?
Very good. Yeah, I think so, and I hope I was reasonably clear about that. The other thing I'd offer back, kind of in response to that, Mike, is that we won't so much as say, here's the question or questions or even hypotheses. I'd hope what we'd come up with would be a little more general in that. Here are a few directions and a few key hypotheses as we see it, and hopefully the tech team and others will offer their own hypotheses, and we'll kind of flesh that thing out as a group.
I think that sounds like a very good approach. I'm curious, Kevin, Neil, any thoughts, suggestions, concerns about that?
Nope. Yeah, really nothing here.
Okay. I know that there's another RFP out now, I believe, with the JVs that's looking at some of these same type of areas, and I want to make sure that we're adding value and not duplicating effort.
Yeah, Mike, I honestly don't know what you're talking about as far as the RFP.
Okay. I saw something last week, I believe it was, an announcement for a JV-sponsored RFP, but I'll send it to you, Kevin.
Awesome, thank you.
You bet. Ashley, you still with us?
Yep, Mike, I'm here.
Do you want to take over from here, or do you want me to run your slides for you?
Yeah, well, actually, you can just go ahead and run the slides. That's fine. That'll be easier.
Okay.
So, hey, everybody. I just wanted to provide a real quick, brief update on communications activities over the last few months. Just kind of fill you in on what's been going on. I may have mentioned this to folks on one of our previous calls. I believe I did, but we are currently working to develop a Midwest Landscape Conservation Communications Network. And I know that's quite a mouthful right there to say, but in essence, we have over 35 representatives from across the LCC partnership, agencies and organizations who specialize in communications and public affairs activities. And we're actually going to be holding our first meeting on January 9th, this coming January, essentially to outline and see, well, first and foremost, to provide an overview of LCC activities. In many cases, this is going to be the first time that a lot of these public affairs folks are learning and hearing about LCCs, so we'll take that opportunity to share with them kind of the overarching mission, how we are trying to create relevancy and connect people back to natural resource issues and all of the ongoing research that's currently funded through the LCC, and really what our big picture vision is. But then we're also, after we have that overview, we're going to be talking about some of the communications challenges and opportunities that might exist, either to work collaboratively across agency lines, just as we're doing in the science community. So I just wanted to make you guys aware that meeting is happening. I'm super excited about it. I think we've got a lot of really great folks with good expertise in public affairs, whether dealing with media, congressionals, or certain stakeholder groups like private landowners as well. So once we actually have a lot of this human dimensions research, we can actually go out there and start implementing communications plans based on the research that comes out of this. So I think it's all going to tie together really nicely. So I'll keep folks in the know as that piece kind of continues and that network continues to build.
So, Ashley, this is Rick. Let me add a couple of comments here.
Sure.
Ashley presented this information at our steering committee meeting as well, and there was quite a bit of discussion from our steering committee about how important this is from a couple of perspectives, making sure that we're getting the information that we're developing out effectively, and taking advantage of the expertise that everybody at the table brings to the communications realm in that regard of getting the information out. The other aspect of that is that the Secretary yesterday was very interested in this discussion as well, and I did get a chance to also talk a little bit about what we're doing in that regard. And she's really high on getting this communication stuff out, again, the human dimension stuff, and then making this stuff relevant to the biggest, broadest audience we possibly can to effectively engage the public in conservation. So she was very excited about this as well as our steering committee. So I just wanted to toss that in, Ashley.
Thanks, Rick. And, I'll also throw this out there. This group is probably going to change over time. We may need new members over time. So continue, if there's a public affairs specialist, communications coordinator within your all's agencies that you think might be a good fit for this group and would be interested, then please feel free to share my information with them, and we'll definitely get them plugged in. Rick actually already mentioned the Secretary of the Interior visit that happened yesterday, but there was actually one other piece of that that visit, and that was a Banking on Nature announcement. Essentially what that is an economic analysis that was done for national wildlife refuges, showing their economic contributions to local economies. They actually sampled, I think, 92 refuges out of the 50 or so, or 500 or so refuges across the country. 12 of those were actually here in the Midwest part of the country, showing dollar for dollar how much those public lands contribute back to local economies based on the money that's appropriated to them. So that was really an interesting announcement. You guys can certainly check it out on the National DOI website, and it links, and why I wanted to bring that up is it actually links quite nicely back to Billy Gascoigne's work with the LCC and the USGS Land Use and Economics in the Prairie Pothole Region study that was done. We worked with Billy and other folks to get that report out to county commissioners, regional media, and the LCC community, but it was kind of a nice tie-in there in terms of the economic contributions of research, of public lands. Hey, Mike, you can go ahead and move that forward. Okay. Was there any questions or comments on any of that?
Hey, Ashley,
Yeah.
This is Jeff. Is there a listing of all the people in your network?
Yes, actually, I'm happy to share with you guys if you like. I'll just send you the email list that we've got. And if you want to identify who's on there we actually have 5 or 6 folks on there from USGS. So we've got,
that's okay. I just want to make sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So it is that time of year again to start producing our annual report. You guys may remember last year it was quite a hefty booklet. There are 30 plus pages. We were covering 3 years in that report. So this year, my hope and my intent is that we can really trim down on the length of the report itself and make it a little bit more reader friendly. So one of the new sections of that report that we are going to include is and this was actually a great idea from Mike, a member spotlight. And what we'd like to do is throw these questions out to you guys as the technical committee members. We'll also be sharing them with the steering committee folks as well. But we'd really like to hear from you and include your perceptions, your insights, your opinions about how the LCC has evolved over the past few years and your involvement. So we've come up with a group of questions, and please feel free to take a look at them. Maybe select one or two. You definitely don't have to respond to every single one. This is just kind of a teaser to get your responses. But if you would be able to take a few minutes, answer some of the questions that stick out to you, and send those in to me by November 20th, and we'll feature those in the 2013 annual report.
Not only does this give us a chance to showcase our members who've done a lot of the heavy lifting over the last 3 years with some of the responses to these questions, but this is helpful for us as well, and we aren't going to edit your responses. Please be as candid as you want to be, and we'll learn from whatever the responses are as well. This will help us move forward as a group. Do you have another slide here, Ashley?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
So I want to open it up for questions or comments here for Ashley before we go on to the last piece of this. And again, Ashley, thank you so much for all your heavy lifting. The communication piece is coming together very nicely. I want to encourage folks again to register and use the website. I'll be honest, I just registered myself maybe a few days ago, and it's taken way too long for me to do that. But thank you for all the great work getting that new website up and running as well.
Yeah, and as folks do start registering, please let me know if you encounter any bugs. I know Jeff had a problem uploading one of the documents this morning, so just let me know. We'll continue to work through those bugs and fixes that need to be fixed. So just bring it to my attention, and we'll get it sorted.
Even though the website is still relatively new, I think you sent me some statistics, Ashley, that says we've had a few thousand folks look on that website for information already, which is great.
Yep, we're up to just over 3,000 individual site visits.
That's terrific. I think that's a reflection of all your hard work. Thank you. So the next 3 months, we're going to have to divide these monthly calls in half. We're going to have the first half, which will feature some of our recently completed or nearly completed efforts. Todd Preston was supposed to give his webinar today, but because we had to play a little catch-up with the RFP development, Todd agreed to wait a month. And on December 4th, Todd will give us the ongoing efforts, and he should be nearly wrapped up with his statistical analysis by then of the work associated with invasive species and the energy development in the Bakken. We're not going to have a call, obviously, on the first Wednesday of January because that's the first of the month, but on the 8th of January, Johann and Ben and Ann are going to provide a webinar rolling out the results of that great project. That's just been a terrific piece of work and probably one of the best things we've done, I think, as an LCC. And then on the 5th of February, some of you may not know much about this project. It was a small contribution that we made to the folks up in Canada doing a summary of some of the land use change analyses and efforts. And it's got a couple of names, but the landscape patterns, environmental quality analysis is one name for this. Ashley's been working with the folks in Alberta on the rollout of some of the media with this. The big thing on this is the searchable database, I believe, will be up and running relative to this project, hopefully by February. Did I hear that right on the call this week, Ashley?
Yeah, I'm hoping it will be sooner than that, possibly as early as December. So we'll just have to keep posted. I'm sure Ian and Seth will be able to let us know when that's up and live, and we'll be rolling that out as soon as that searchable database goes live.
But the hard copy of the report is now available, and we'll post that on our website. But the searchable piece of this is still probably a month or two away. Is that correct, Ashley? Is that the way you understand it?
Yep, that's correct. Yep, that's what I heard.
And so Ian and folks with the subcontractors, I think, will be able to showcase that effort in February.
So let me add a little bit to that discussion so you all have a little better idea what this is. Late last year, Ian Dyson is with the Prairie Conservation Forum in Alberta. He's actually participated on, you know, we gave a presentation about this some time ago to the steering committee. The Great Northern LCC put $5,000 toward this literature review. We had a little extra money from another pot of administrative money that we used to put $5,000 to, which meant Mike and I just didn't travel somewhere toward the end of last year. But the interesting thing about this is, and when you see this, you'll see the long list of entities, including the Canadian Forces base up there. But there's a whole bunch of different partners. But the interesting thing about this piece of work, to me, was that they are using this to sit down with policymakers who are asking them for this information so they can better plan land use activities and policy development based upon information that the biologists are going to supply to them. So it's kind of a little different twist than the way we do business down here, where we try to provide this stuff to policymakers and land use folks, and they kind of ignore us. Their folks up there actually ask for this information. So,
but this synthesis doesn't only include Alberta. It's the work that they've tried to pull together includes all of the prairie provinces as well as the states that are in the prairies on the U.S. side.
It's a pretty comprehensive document. So it was pretty neat, and we had the opportunity kind of last minute to participate in this, and so that's our tie to what's going on up there with that one. And you'll see that on the website and then the searchable database. But I thought it was interesting that people that are doing land use planning for a whole host of different things, including their military, have come to these folks and asked them for this information to help them better plan the developments that they're going to undertake.
We have a number of other projects that are wrapping up over the next 3 months, and we'll get them in the queue beginning in March. We'll certainly be spending some of the time in the next 3 months talking about our process for release of the RFP and review of the incoming proposals and how we're going to handle that. But I think I really look forward to hearing from these three projects. I think they were all good pieces of work, and I think everybody on the tech committee will benefit from tuning into those as well. We've got a few minutes left on this call, and I always want to open it up for any thoughts or comments from folks. I know it's been 2 months since we discussed anything, but I'll throw this call open for any comments, suggestions, insights that folks want to add here. Other than the weather in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, Mike.
You heading this way anytime soon?
I just came back from that way. But anything, Sarah, from you or Ann? I think I saw you on the webinar. Steve, you got anything? Okay. All right. With that, I want to thank everybody for dialing in today, and look forward to talking to folks in December. Obviously, we'll be working between now and then to see if we can't polish up the prongs of the RFP and send those out to folks for additional feedback. The deadline of November 27th for providing Jeff and or Kate feedback on their two read-aheads that we sent around. If you don't have them, let me know. I'll send it to you again. Any last words, Rick? I'll leave it up to you to close us out. Any last things from the Secretary?
Again, just to reiterate, I talked about our partnership, and she was very interested in the diversity on our group and the fact that we've got a broad coalition of folks here who are working on these important issues. So that was exciting to her. She was very complimentary about our LCC in particular. So I came away from that feeling really good about that.
That's probably as good a thing as anything we can end on. So
thanks everybody.
Bye.